This is the Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz.
I'm Zero.
And Zero, how are you today?
A little exhausted from my work stuff going on, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. We're going to keep that to ourselves. All right, Zero, so we are here because we're going through the filmography of Wong Kar-Wai. Last week we did Chungking Express, and this week we're doing, I believe, his most celebrated film, which is the 2000 drama In the Mood for Love, starring Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung. Again, this is his most celebrated film. Whenever I hear someone praise Wong Kar-Wai, this is the film that I keep hearing about. The film that is so beautiful and it is definitely his best film. So I was definitely excited to see this movie before I saw the last two movies of his and didn't quite like them, of course. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Zero, you saw this movie before. So tell me when you last saw this and what were your thoughts when you saw it last?
Last time I saw it was, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. It was just one of those things I was like, oh, hey, I haven't watched this in a good while, and just kind of tossed it in to watch. It was a VCD copy that my ex-girlfriend gave me many years ago, back when I'd gotten together with her many, many years ago. So, and that was one of the parting breakup gifts that she had ended up giving to me and everything. So, yeah, every once in a while, just tossing it in just to kind of watch and everything. But oddly, I couldn't find that copy this time around.
Oh, wow. God, the VCD must have some crazy artifacting now.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That would actually anger me watching that on that because of how the picture quality would be on that. But again, I understand. Like, I have movies that are from like the first DVDs that came out that I still have, and the only reason why I have them is because they haven't made another version of it. Like American Splendor is a movie I love, but they've never made a Blu-ray or a 4K of that movie. So I have no choice but to keep that DVD. So I understand that to a certain extent. But anyway, this is also on the Criterion Collection, so you have no excuse now. So you need to buy in the Criterion Collection. Anyway, don't get. From what I've heard, do not get the World of Wong Kar-Wai box set. I've heard so many problems with that box set. But anyway, let's get past all that with my Criterion-ness and stuff. Why don't we just get right down to the review of In the Mood for Love, shall we?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do it. So, I'm going to start off, I'm just going to shoot right away. I like this movie a lot more than I like the last two that we watched. I think the sense of style that Wong Kar-Wai has in his movies, I think fit better in this movie than it did in Chungking and The Grandmaster. That said, I still have issues with this movie. Even though I think I liked it a lot more than his other work, I would say. Obviously, I think you enjoyed this movie, correct?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what was the thing that really grabbed you the first time you watched it, and with subsequent viewings as well? What's the thing that grabs you about this movie?
I think for me, it's just the cinematography and the framing of the shots. There's just a lot of very good stylistic choices in this movie, in my opinion. It isn't like crazy film experimenty as some of the other Wong Kar-Wai films, where you've got like the slow-mo shots, the Blair Witch chase down shots and stuff like that. It's just kind of, I don't want to oversimplify it, but the best way I can think of it is it's just almost kind of a back to basics sort of cinematography direction with this movie.
For the most part, I agree with you. And when he does do those camera tricks, but he only does slow-mo in this. He only slows down the speed in certain scenes. But with some of the scenes that he does them in, they make sense. Which is where, in the other movies he's done, where I sit there and go, why is that necessary? For the most part, when he does those tricks, I was fine with it. It actually enhanced the film in certain scenes. There are other scenes where I still think he has that issue. I agree with you with the cinematography and the way that the movie looks stylistically and the way that the movie is shot. I think it's exquisite to look at. I especially have to note the costume design in this, the clothes that the main two characters wear, specifically Maggie Cheung in this, the dresses that she wears in this, they're feminine, but they're not. How do I put this? They are feminine clothing, and they look really nice on her. They're not overly feminine. How do I put this? Because I don't normally look at a woman and go, oh yeah, that's a nice dress. But when I watch this movie, and all the costumes she wears are impeccable and they're beautiful to look at, but they actually fit with the character really well in this movie too. Same thing with Tony Leung's character in this. The costumes of the two characters end up making more character for the character than I would think in most movies to a certain extent. Whereas Maggie Cheung's character is, sure, she's elegant and she's very demure and she's very pretty, but the costumes add another layer to the character that I wasn't expecting in this, especially with Wong Kar-Wai, and when his stylistic choices seem to be very skin deep. But in this movie, it really enhances the character, I think, in this.
I kind of feel the same. Chinese-style cheongsam dresses that she wears throughout every scene, they're kind of like a simplistic elegance to them. That's really the best way that I can put them. And it's almost kind of period correct, at least from some of the stuff that I've read about, like 1960s Hong Kong and everything. It just seems so very period correct, and especially the fact that she's working as a secretary for a shipping company to boot. So just usually secretaries back in the 60s were just kind of nice looking flowers that just kind of helped whatever business executive plan out his appointments and stuff. So it was just kind of bang on for like period correctness. And then of course Tony Leung, being a newspaper editor, he's got kind of like the standard 60s salaryman sort of dress with like the suits and the pocket watch with the chain and everything. It's just so bang on perfect.
Right. Like what you said about Maggie Cheung's attire, which is simplistic, because a lot of movies, even from other countries, I'm not only talking about from America, but in other countries too, when they want to accentuate the beauty of a character, they want to give them not just outlandish, but very, how do I put this? The dress that they do with the characters not only accentuate the character, the actress, not the character, but they also make him stand out. And with Maggie Cheung's character, even though they are very beautiful dresses, they don't stand out. They are pretty, but they have a sense. There is a purpose to why she dresses that way. She dresses pretty, she dresses very nice, but not to draw attention. And that, I think, is central to that character as well, and fits so well with the character and what Maggie Cheung's performance gives in that movie. Same thing with Tony Leung, like you said. Yes, it is a salaryman. That's like a basic person that works in an office, correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. I want to push back a little on that, because I think the style of that character is a little more than, I would say, a basic salaryman type of thing. To a certain extent, it's not like overly grandiose, but there's a little more of a style to that than I would say to just a basic salaryman costume in that sense. Because I do like the way he looks, but Tony Leung's character is also very understated, very quiet. Maybe not meek is the best word for it, but definitely a character. Not that blends in the background, but is respectable, but also is very, I don't know how to put this. Maybe you can help me out here.
Reserved.
Thank you. Reserved. That's why I like you, Zero. That's why I like you. Finish my sentences. There you go. Yes, a very reserved person and respectful as well. And that's just I think that's with the costumes why they fit so well in this. Because they, at the very least, they add character to the character that the character themselves does not have to actually outright say. I think without these costumes fitting very well, the impact of this movie would not be as good in this movie. I'm going on and on about the costumes, but yeah. Anyway, we'll move on a little bit from here. You talked about the shot composition as one of the highlights of the movie. Is there a specific example, without going into spoilers, that you can give that you particularly liked in this movie?
It's towards the later half of the movie where there's just a lot of mirrors and the camera sort of pans left and right. Just that one was just visually intriguing, and even though it looks simple, just kind of on paper, it just has such style to it.
I like seeing the scenes in the rain specifically in this movie, because a lot of movies that do tend to use rain in this, they try to accentuate romanticism to a certain extent, and this movie does it in a way too, but it's very much reserved in this. Because when you see movies that have scenes in the rain, there's usually a dramatic flourish or a kiss or they embrace or they, things like that. But in this movie, it accentuates the loneliness that these characters have. And the rain just adds, I would say adds to it a little bit to the relationship with these characters. You know what? I forgot one key thing. To mention, which is the plot of the movie. I guess the best way to say it without spoiling the movie is these two neighbors, a man and woman, strike up a friendship, who then realize that their prospective partners are cheating on them with each other. I guess it's the best way to put it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. The movie chronicles from that point on how their relationship develops, and we will stay there without getting the spoilers in that. So yeah, like the rain and everything in this film, to a certain extent, from the style to costumes to the way it's shot, further enhances the story and the characters, which is the thing that the other Wong Kar-Wai films that we've watched, I think, failed to do. Is why I felt the style of those films felt kind of skin deep and empty to me. Whereas I think in this movie, the style and the way the film is shot and the way and everything is made, including the music. My God, the music is so good in this. That really accentuates the story in a way that most films tend not to do very well in this. Especially the story in itself is very slight. It is not a deep story, but the depth, I would say, comes from the style and the way the characters and the environment is in this movie. I would say.
Well, on paper it seems very, very simple. There's just such a depth to it. There's a lot of emotional pull and push and pull through this. If anything, it's kind of weird because it's far more composed than a lot of Wong Kar-Wai's movies.
Yes, that was the thing that surprised me in this movie, because the way that the other two movies that we have is that they're very bombastic, but it's like either Wong Kar-Wai himself decided to pull back on his impulses. Let me make an example of this, okay? I love this director's films, but Quentin Tarantino is a filmmaker that makes Quentin Tarantino films. If he makes any other type of film, I am not interested. But because of his singular style, it would be really weird, and I think it would not be as effective as a filmmaker if he were to make somebody else's movie. But my favorite movie of his is his most restrained and his most reserved film, which is Jackie Brown. It is a film that has a certain amount of style, but it's very reserved and muted. And it's more based on blaxploitation than anything else. Which, in a sense, blaxploitation is a very stylistic type of film, but in the way it's not as stylized as, let's say, I don't know, French New Wave or whatever, or those type of things. Where blaxploitation, as stylized it is, it's very grounded in a certain sense. which is why I liked Quentin Tarantino when he did Jackie Brown. And this is kind of why I feel it with Wong Kar-Wai in a certain sense, that he stripped apart a lot of those stylistic choices and just stuck to the seams of the story and then just enhanced it in most circumstances is what he did in this movie, I would say. How many other Wong Kar-Wai movies have you seen? I'm really curious.
Oh God.
You've seen a lot of them?
I think I've seen most of them.
Oh, okay.
But I haven't seen the other movies that form the informal trilogy that surrounds In the Mood for Love. The prequel being Days of Being Wild, and then the sequel being 2046. I haven't seen those. But if I remember right, I think I've seen most of Wong Kar-Wai's stuff. And oddly, just this is the one film that I think I just like the most out of his filmography, mostly just because through restraint, there's so much more substance.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. I'm going to be honest with you here, and I've wanted to watch a lot of Wong Kar-Wai films because I've seen stills and a few of his movies and stuff, and a lot of scenes, and it really interested me. But after going through Chungking and Grandmaster, I was like, I don't think I want to do this. And then I saw this movie, and if this is the best of his movies, I think I'm fine. I'm not sure if I'm gonna seek out his other films. There are some people who say Fallen Angels is his best movie. I think is what it's called. That's the movie after Chungking that I think some people consider the sequel to Chungking Express. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go back and watch his other films, to be quite honest with you. But I did end up really enjoying this movie. Performances. I mean, there's really only two to talk about. That's Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung. I mean, Tony Leung is very good in this. He is very understated, and he plays the part with a reserved kind of... I don't know how to explain it, but the way he plays this character, although he is quiet and maybe not standoffish, but he is very reserved. He does it in a sensitive enough portrayal that doesn't come off as cold or aloof. And it's a hard balance to strike, but he does a very good job in this, I would say.
He's trying to process just the situation, especially towards the second third of the movie, where just things start to unravel between both characters' marriages and stuff like that. And even though just it is a tragic thing to go through, just he's got kind of like just a reserved nature about it, and it's almost kind of like a interesting way that he's coping with it. It's not like the usual male portrayal of just a man being betrayed by his wife cheating on him and stuff. Just, typical rage, just flying off the handle sort of stuff. But yeah, just there's just kind of like a reserved calmness about it, and at the same time, just with his neighbor and everything, just he isn't like overly pushy with her either during their friendship and whatnots.
It definitely shows a sensitivity that I think a lot of male actors don't show in these types of roles. You're right. Usually when these roles are given to men, in these type of roles where they're being cheated on by their wives, there's usually a scene of anger or just intense loneliness, or just again intense anger at the partner, and because that is really the go-to for get people to identify with that type of hurt. It is that they're angry and upset and hurt. And in this movie, and it might be due to the friendship that he's striking with the other character, it is much more reserved, but it's also a much more layered performance in this. And I really end up really liking this performance specifically because of that. But what I will say, though, I think the best performance in the movie is Maggie Cheung in this. I won't get into the scene that really lynched it for me with her, but there are scenes in this movie that in a lesser actor, to a certain extent, wouldn't be able to pull off. With showing the hurt that she's going through without being overly emotional in this. And there are scenes where she's crying and where she's upset, but they're still pretty reserved to a certain extent. Even when she is acting, well, of course she's acting, but when the character is acting like everything's fine, you can still see the pain in this character's eyes, which again is really hard for an actor to do to a certain extent, because they not only have to pretend that they are okay, but they have to also pretend that they are okay while pretending that they're not okay. You get what I'm saying? That there's a much bigger depth to the character that she is pulling off that I think most actors would have a real hard time with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just one of the pivotal scenes on just things go wrong. Just it isn't like an overt crying scene. It's just kind of, it's kind of got like an artistic subtlety to it. Mm-hmm. Because just you hear the shower going on and just wondering, just okay, what's going on, and then as the camera pans closer and closer to the shower, you can just hear her crying.
And that scene too specifically, if this was done in America, and this is a thing I kept thinking about throughout the entire film, if this was an American movie that had that type of scene, not only would you see that character naked, because it would be a scene where you would show ultimate vulnerability. And a lot of English directors do this too with their actresses. To show them most vulnerable is also their most desired sense. Not only do they not show that, but they show it in a way that is still intensely private, and it actually helps with the scene too, because she is a very private person in this movie too, and it keeps that character intact to a certain extent as well. There's a lot about Maggie Cheung's performance that I would love to get into. That's going to head into spoilers. Okay, so we're going to get into spoilers for In the Mood for Love. If you have not seen it, you can stop and come back when you're ready. We're going to get the spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Why don't you start with where you want to go with spoilers? What scene do you want to discuss, or what aspect of the movie that we couldn't discuss without getting the spoilers? So go right ahead. What do you want to start with?
I think the reveal on just where things start to fall apart was cleverly done, because just you have Maggie Cheung's character, Miss Chan. She goes over to Mr. Chow's home, Mr. Chow being played by Tony Leung. She comes over to Mr. Chow's home, and then Mr. Chow's wife's she answers the door, and she's just like, oh, hi, can I help you with something? And she was like, oh, well, I was just wondering if Mr. Chan was home, because, Mr. Chow was home, because I just wanted to return something to him. And pretty much just Mr. Chow's wife's like, oh, yeah, just he's out working late right now, but, I'll let him know that you stopped by. And then kind of closes the door, and then you kind of hear her talking to Mrs. Chan's husband, kind of quietly, going, basically,
that was your wife.
Yeah, that was your wife. And that's just kind of when everything starts to unravel and everything. And then as she's trying to process this, and the scene with her crying in Miss Chan crying in the shower happens, it kind of layers on just Mr. Chow finally kind of tying the puzzle pieces together and everything, because he ends up just kind of striking a conversation with Miss Chan, and he's just like, hey, just would you like to go to dinner sometime and talk and everything? And at one point he's asking her, he's like, hey, just if you've got a nice bag, do you mind if your husband picks one up kind of like yours, because I'm terrible with gifts for my wife. And I think something like that would be very nice for her, because she's always fussy about looking fashionable. And then she ends up kind of pushing back with the line of, isn't that kind of tasteless to get something in the same color as like your neighbor? And then he was like, oh yeah, I guess that is kind of tasteless to do that. She ends up kind of pushing back and going, hey, where'd you get that tie that you're wearing right now? And then he kind of pushes back and goes, oh, yeah, well, my wife said that, just she got it when she was out of town on business, and it was from someplace out of town, and it's just not something that they sell here in Hong Kong. And then that's when she kind of realizes, oh my God, I think he knows. And she kind of quips back with, what are you trying to say here? And then that's kind of when both of them sort of make the connection of, oh God, your wife is cheating with my husband.
In other movies, especially in American movies, and which is why I love movies outside of the U.S., this would have been a much more dramatic scene. It would be much more spelled out. There would be cutaways to like the husband and the woman's husband and the man's wife together and stuff like that to put it all together for the audience, because they don't respect the audience's intelligence. And this movie definitely does. It definitely expects, because it is an adult movie for adults, not in the way that most people would see it as an adult movie, but it is a movie for adults that respects their intelligence to a certain extent. And I really like that. I really like that in this movie, that they don't just spell it out for you to a certain extent. They let you pick it apart, figure it out on your own, and then at the speed at which the characters are figuring it out too. Let me ask you something. It is something that when I was watching the movie, I was confused by at first, but then I was strangely moved by towards the end. In most movies, when they talk about the relationship developing, it would be more character driven. It would be more like, oh, the character gets to know about this person and then what this person does. In this movie, they do something very different. So in this movie, what they do, my interpretation, I would say, is that the second act of the movie, it seems like what they do is, instead of having dialogue and relationship matters between the characters, they frame the movie in a way where it's about desires of the characters to a certain extent, where instead of it being like these guys growing into a friendship and everything, it's more along the lines of, what, man, I wish I would have done it this way, or I wish that we would have learned that way, or what would I do if my husband admitted to me what happened? What would I do if my wife admitted to what would happen? Or in a specific scene where they try to figure out how this relationship started with them. I think that was a very interesting way of not only trying to add depth into what happened, but on top of that, showing the relationship growing more and more as they start to realize how easy it is for this to happen to a certain extent. That's where I'm trying to get at. It is, in most movies, when they do this type of scene where they want the characters to grow, it is just about the characters. But then, in a strange way, they make the characters that you do not see at all, which is Maggie Cheung's husband and Tony Leung's wife, they make them out into characters too, in a way, by trying to reenact what exactly led them to this thing happening. And it was actually fascinating, because not only did it make them characters and a little more fleshed out, but it actually deepened that relationship in a believable way, even though it was kind of fantastical.
It's also kind of interesting that even though just we never see their faces, we never see much of them at all. The most that we get out of Mr. Chow's wife and Mrs. Chan's husband are just mostly their voices. That's it. And in that minimalism, there's just so much. It's like that weird paradox of sometimes less is more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And it's something that I would have with the last two movies we watched, I would have never pegged with Wong Kar-Wai, because Wong Kar-Wai just wants more style, more bombacity in his stories that really are meant to be personal. But he adds all the style and flair, which I think, to me, with the other two movies we watched, seem to drown out the drama and the personability of those stories. And this is the movie that he did that I think married those two things really well. I want to talk specifically about when he slows the speed down of the movie. There are certain scenes where he does this, and it is really effective. And I'm talking about the scene where they get noodles.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that scene specifically works so well when it is slowed down, because you have the scene where they're passing each other by, and there's this palpability in how they interacted without even interacting, which is the crazy part about it, that adds to the drama and the effectiveness of the relationship so well.
It almost had kind of like a Strangers in the Night sort of vibe to it, and it was just kind of emotionally evocative, but just at the same time, again, kind of the big theme of this movie, just it's so minimal, but it has so much impact.
It really adds to the fact that there is clearly a sexual desire in this movie for these characters to want to have that relationship. And this is the key thing about this movie that I think works really well, that I'm just figuring out now as we're talking. And I love movies like this, where you talk to somebody about it and you get more out of it when you talk. I love these type of movies. But the thing that really is stuck with me now that I'm thinking about is that it is clear that these characters want a sexual relationship, but not in a way to spite their past lover. It is because they are realizing that they are falling for each other in a very powerful way. But their sense of, I'm going to say duty, but I think it's the wrong word to say here, but there's this need to respect their vows, even though it's clearly not being reciprocated by their other partners. It's that push and pull in this movie that I think is so damn effective. It's so good in this that now thinking about it is just like, wow, there is so much more depth to this movie than I actually have given it credit for before we got on this call. Or if you're not seeing it, let me know. Feel free. But I'm getting much more out of this movie than I think I realized I had before I watched it. Clearly the relationship is platonic. They're trying to keep it platonic, but the push and pull of the second half of the movie is them trying not to give in.
It's them trying not to give in, but at the same time, just the desire just gets kind of stronger and stronger, because especially towards the second half of the movie, just where they meet up and talk and everything, and just Mr. Chow ends up telling Mrs. Chan, he's just like, maybe to kind of fill the void of my wife just kind of gone and vacant from my life, maybe I'll start writing a martial arts novel and everything. And of course, just it kind of starts off with that, and of course he ends up asking Mrs. Chow or Mrs. Chan. He's just like, hey, how about you help me write this novel? And of course she goes, I like reading martial arts novels, but I can't write a martial arts novel. And he's like, that's fine, because I could use someone as a springboard to kind of, work out my ideas for my martial arts novel. And I mean, it starts off like that. And then of course, just as they're kind of seeing each other more and more often, it's at this one particular moment, just they end up kind of thinking, oh God, our neighbors are really, really nosy about everyone's business. We gotta scale this back. We gotta do something. We can't meet up like this. It just doesn't look good. And of course, that's when Mr. Chow goes, hey, well, I've got an idea. I'll get a room at a hotel. That way, you can just come visit me in the hotel while I'm writing my novel, and we don't have to worry about nosy neighbors and stuff like that. And of course, she kind of goes, well, you don't have to do that. I don't have to visit. You're fine. You can write this novel on your own. Not a big deal. And then he's just like, but I'd love for you to help me write this. And things kind of gradually escalate. And it's kind of interesting to see this, because in so many Western movies, this would be like just kind of like a rocket ship of, oh man, look, they're forming the relationship. Look how fast it's going. They're making out and they're getting sexual and all this other stuff. And there's just kind of like a very elegant subtlety to like the growing feelings between these two characters.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I agree. And that, especially with how American films does romance. And the sex in American films when it comes to romance is like the zenith. It is the thing to aspire to most times, which is why it's kind of weird with American films. Because Americans do stigmatize sex to a certain degree. But then on the other hand, they look at it as the tipping point of which a relationship is actually real. It's very strange, but yeah, like in this movie, so much about the relationship and how they build it in this movie. When most romance films, they build and build and build, there usually is the fall off. The second act cliche of most romance films is the first off, they hate each other, but then they start to grow to like each other. Second act, they really start to like each other, but then a misunderstanding happens, and then it falls apart, and they're separated. But in the third act, they find a way to come together. Of course, that's not what happens. It's with these characters, that's not going to happen. I think another elegant way they deal with this in this movie is when it's not such a subtle reference, but when Tony Leung's character talks about what, I guess, is it Buddhist monks do when they have secrets? They carve a hole in a tree and they speak it in, and then they cover it in mud to hide the secret. Is that,
Yep.
Is that a Buddhist thing, or is that, am I?
Yeah, it's like an old Buddhist tradition. Has been like written down in legends for like years and years and years.
Okay. Is not very subtle what they do in that, but it is definitely, I think, emotionally evocative for this character, because it keeps true to the character, because at no point does he tell anybody about it in this movie, and neither does Mrs. Chan. Right? Is that correct, Mrs. Chan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Neither does she in this. So it's like they're, and this is another thing that I think other romance movies would do. It would be a dirty little secret, but it's not dirty at all in this movie. It's actually quite poignant and very, not only just classy, but very emotionally resonant in this. It would be very easy and very cheap to just make them have sex at some point, or make them have a physical type of relationship at some point, even kiss. They don't even kiss in this movie, which is a staple of what you do in romance movies. But it's far more romantic and far more emotionally resonant that they don't in this movie. It takes a specific thing to do to make that work, and the movie does it very well. When I got in this review, I had my mind set on a specific score and the way I was thinking about this movie before. I'm completely changing my mind now. Now really discussing it and everything, even though I thought these things in the end as well in there. As much as I do like this film, and I did mention the slowing of the speed in certain scenes, and I thought it was actually very effective. There are scenes, and I guess it's something that Wong Kar-Wai does, and it's just going to annoy me every time I watch his movies. There are certain scenes where he slows the camera down and the speed down, and there's no point to it whatsoever. Like, I'm talking like when there is a shot of a clock ticking, and that's done in half speed for no reason. Or that Tony Leung's character is watching Maggie Cheung walk away. No reason whatsoever that has to be there. Or that he is just sitting in a hallway and he's walking into a door. No reason for it to be slow, other than it looks cool. It still cheapens the movie a little bit, but not as badly as it is done in Chungking or The Grandmaster. I did find it really weird that he has this crutch of, let's slow the movie down because, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, there are definitely those moments that the filming is done in halftime, or just time is just slowed down for just no real good reason. And I guess that's one of his trademark flourishes, which in those particular instances, yeah, it adds nothing. Yeah. But at the same time, just you have moments where it's just done with great effect, like the rain scenes that you mentioned. Just, my goodness, just the slowdown for the rain scenes, it just adds an element of drama to those scenes.
Yeah.
And it's just like, damn it, man, you got it almost there. You almost there, damn it.
No, you're absolutely right, because I'm sitting here enjoying the movie. I'm going, wait, what? Why? It's like, why are you doing? Okay, sure. It's just this thing, I guess. Whatever. And you know what? To be fair, some will probably listen to this and go, every director does this to a certain extent. Like, Scorsese has certain things that he does in every film. Altman does it. Tarantino does it, a person that I've mentioned. Kubrick has done it, even though he does different types of movies. They all have certain things that they do in their movies. It's just basically a stamp that, yeah, I made it. That's how you know. And I guess that's fine, but it just adds nothing to the movie at all. And it's kind of distracting. And it happens a couple of times. But it doesn't, I guess it doesn't hurt the movie to a certain extent. But it just comes off as like, why are you doing this, Wong Kar-Wai? You don't need to. Stop.
When it gets to the end, where just the friendship sort of parts ways and everything, it's really interesting, because of course just Mrs. Chan ends up going back to the rental home that she's renting out and everything, and the landlady is just like, oh hey, you've been out a lot, what's going on? And she ends up making kind of a white lie to kind of get the nosy landlady to just kind of buzz off and everything. And she's like, oh, well, yeah, my mom's been in town, so I've been spending time with her. I just got back from having breakfast with her. And then, of course, the landlady ends up telling Mrs. Chan, oh, well, just, it's always good to do these things when you're young, but, just when your husband gets back from his business trip, don't let him leave. Just your marriage will be better off that way, and it's just going to be better if you sort of try to spend more time with him. And then that's kind of where the friendship starts to get a bit distant and everything. She knows that her husband is still having an affair and everything, and of course just you have this one pivotal scene where just Mr. Chow is just hoping for things to change. Maybe Mrs. Chan can get the strength to just, break it off with her husband and everything. And he even goes through the motions of like trying to get her to have the courage to, just kind of call him out on having an affair and everything. And just he ends up finally saying, as much as I'd like things to change, I just don't want to be here in the same old place waiting. So I'm going to head out to Singapore and maybe get a change of scenery and everything. And then that's just kind of where just their relationship kind of as friends sort of drifts apart and everything. And of course she ends up saying, well, landlady lectured me and stuff like that, and maybe I try to patch things up and reconcile things with my husband and all that. And then she ends up kind of dropping the very powerful line that sort of just changes things, and she's just like, maybe it's best we don't see each other anymore.
When you have these types of scenes, there's always a hint that they could get back together, even if it's ambiguous to a certain extent, that they would turn around and realize they need each other in their lives in some aspect, and they would just be in their lives at some point. But they don't do that in this movie, and I think it's actually for the better. Definitely an effective scene. I will say that the final scene in the film, which is him in that temple and putting the secret in and walking away, I guess it wasn't as emotionally evocative and watching it when I first saw it than I was expecting, but it's still an effective scene. I came in here expecting to give this a 3 out of 5. I definitely enjoyed the movie, and I thought it was Wong Kar-Wai's best movie by far, but I still had issues with the stylistic choices that he made to a certain extent. But then as I'm discussing it and we unpeel the depth a lot more in this movie, I've become much more surprised by how more in-depth the movie is than I actually give it credit for. And that's the beauty about talking about films like this with people that you respect and that you can open up to, because you can then uncover things in the movie that maybe you didn't quite realize after you watched it to a certain extent. The performances are great. I think the stylistic choices and the color and everything they did in the movie are great, except for maybe a few scenes that I thought were kind of distracting. But other than that, I think it's a very good movie. I get why this movie is as beloved as it is. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I think it is a very good movie, and I definitely understand why it's as celebrated as it is. So 4 stars out of 5 for me for In the Mood for Love.
For me, it's probably going to be right at 80%. So exactly the same rating as you gave. And I think for me, really what kind of brings it all home for me is just the fact that in being so restrained, Wong Kar-Wai does so much with this movie. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, in my opinion, it's probably one of my favorites out of his entire filmography from the majority of the movies of his that I've seen. It just does so much with so little because he's restrained himself so much. It's all the better for it. The camera tricks, yeah, there's some bad moments where, you know, you've got the slowdowns for no reason and stuff like that. But I think for the majority of the movie, the cinematography and kind of the scene compositions are just so good that kind of makes the occasional weird stylistic choices for like the slowed down frames for the clocks and stuff like that. It just makes those seem kind of like minor blemishes.
Yes.
But yeah, overall, just probably one of my favorites, and it's one of my favorite films of his for a good reason. And oddly enough, it's because it just follows that principle of doing so much more with less.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100% on your points. And it's these types of movies that I do love that actually respects the intelligence of the people that are watching it and expects them to just follow with them to get what's going on than to just spell out everything. I definitely really like this movie. I might actually grow to love this movie. I might watch it again at some point. But yeah, 4 stars for me, 80% for you, which is kind of the same. Yeah, we definitely recommend this movie. Great movie. Okay, Zero, so we're at the end of the episode, which means we get to talk about what we're going to watch for next week. You have advocated the choice of what to watch for reasons. I will let it go this time. Next time, I'm gonna give you homework, and I'm gonna expect you to yeah. So yeah, why don't we watch something more science fiction-y, I guess? But, you know, because I'm a movie snob, I have to make sure that it is a celebrated movie that has gotten awards. So that's just me. You have to deal with it. And we're going to watch the 2021 film that garnered a bunch of Academy Awards, and but did not get the director his Best Director nomination that people were expecting. And that is the 2021 film Dune, starring Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, and a whole bunch of others. Directed by Denis Villeneuve. Are you familiar with Denis Villeneuve? Probably not, right?
No, definitely not.
He has done a lot of good movies in the past, I would say, 10 years. He's done the sequel to Blade Runner 2049, which is very good. He did Prisoners, which me and Kim watched, which is very good as well. I haven't seen Arrival, but I've heard very good things about that. And then, of course, Dune Part 2 is coming. So that's going to be coming at the end of this year. So I guess it just kind of makes sense that we probably watch this movie in anticipation for that sequel. And I think we both have been wanting to watch this. So better time as any to give it a shot. So are you excited to watch Dune?
Yeah, it's actually been on my watch list for ages. I think it's been on my watch list on HBO Max ever since I bought my house back in 2021. Nice. And it was just been one of those things of, yeah, I'm gonna watch it since my ISP gave me free HBO Max, and I'm gonna watch it. And then just every time, as it is with streaming services, you just see a glut of other stuff, and you're just like, oh man, but this thing just came out on the streaming service. Yeah, let me just go watch that instead.
Yeah, and you know what the issue is too that I find with that is that if the movie is very long, and this is a 2-hour and 30-minute movie, if the movie is very long and there's another movie or TV show that's like shorter, I would skew towards that shorter movie or shorter TV show. That's just my mentality of it, unfortunately. But I get what you're saying, and it happens to me too. So next time, me and Zero are going to watch and review the 2021 movie Dune, starring Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, and Rebecca Ferguson, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Tune in next time if you want to hear our thoughts on that. Our Capital Games Movie Club, I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.